parental uninvolvement, designing lessons students can do with minimal home help. I'm Maria Burns Ortiz. I'm co-founder and CEO of 7th Generation Games. I'm also the mother of 3 children, and I absolutely knew already heading into this pandemic that I love them, but our relationship functions best when we spend 7 to 8 hours apart 5 days a week. And so I've given them strict orders not to touch my office door for the next 45 minutes, although I cannot promise a completely cameo-free presentation. I'm on an advisory committee for a school, and the leader sent out an email saying, we're just trying to gauge how's distance learning going for everyone. And coming into distance learning, I knew that I was qualified to do this, right? I literally run an educational software company teaching math. I've actually taught in the classroom. I understand Common Core math. My kids are in a dual immersion school, and I speak both languages fluently. And still at the end of the day, I'm completely exhausted and over it. And I post pictures like this to social media. And the reality is it's much more like this on a day-to-day basis. And every day feels like preparing for battle. This is a scene from our new game that we're producing, Aztec Empiric Empire. It's about using an epidemic spread to teach middle school math. And it's clearly a little more relevant now than we could have imagined when we pitched in September. But over these same weeks, we've been adding thousands more students to our platform. I've been talking to dozens of teachers, both new to us and who we've been working with for years. And I'm hearing a lot of this same stress level, this kind of battle over getting work done from teachers. And as someone who spent for the last 6 years, a large part of their days thinking about how to improve math education, and previous to this, I would say it was days, now it's more pieced together kinds of minutes. And I joke, but really, just like all of you, we have been trying to figure out how to make things work since it became clear that the school year as we knew it wasn't going to be in the cards. And looking at it through our broader PD and our games that we do, how can we translate that into something that works for students and teachers and parents? So the first thing we did is we made everything available for free. And just so you get more context about what everything is, we have 12 games that teach standards aligned math, primarily 3rd through 8th grade, which is going to be the core part of this kind of range of this presentation today, although there's things that can kind of hopefully be taken regardless of where you are, combined with social studies and elements of language arts, and running on pretty much any device. We have data reporting. We're really big on equity and access, so bridging the digital divide, and we have a number of bilingual games in Spanish and some indigenous languages as well. Everything we've done has been with teachers, and in the cases of the native games with the tribal communities depicted, we have a library of free teacher resources to complement the math and history in our games, and everything we did when we built out our games was optimized for independent learning, because the last thing a teacher wants is to start up a software and have 25 kids immediately asking for help. So we've really been thinking about how to make distance learning not just easier, but more equitable, because we know this is only going to exacerbate an already significant gap. And thinking about this, we went back to the beginning. For us, this is a community on a rural reservation in South Dakota. And we were initially funded and founded to work developing educational software to close the math gap in tribal communities. From there, we moved into math software that could be used for English language learners and English speakers in the same classroom, looking at needs in both rural areas and urban centers. But we really wanted to focus not just on these areas geographically and demographically, but on reaching kids who were struggling, who were falling behind, who were being left behind in math. And we've been fortunate to really grow from there, but because we started with what is from a software development standard would be less than ideal scenario, right? Low end hardware, limited bandwidth, often not a highly technical group of early users. It really gave us a lot of insights into creating educational tools that meet real world needs, and hopefully those are applicable. So I think understanding the challenges were such a key part of what we learned early on as we looked about how could we design lessons and assignments to be used at home with, or be used with minimal help, right? And something that we hopefully are thinking about and sort of designing lessons and assignments right now. And the biggest thing has been accounting for limited internet access, right? In February, about 65% of our games ran completely offline, and we've poured efforts into that since schools started closing, and now 90% of our games or apps are capable of running offline. And this is really important because what works here in a development scenario or in a classroom, it might not work the same way at home, especially in many economically disadvantaged communities or rural communities. Um, and we're working in schools where some cases upwards of 40% of kids have no home internet access. We know that even for many kids who might have access, it's not a 1 GB fiber optic line, right? It's often spotty Wi-Fi from low-end Android devices. I know many districts and cities have pushed to get kids devices and families internet. And in some cases, I've heard it's been a great solution, and in other places I know it's fallen really short. So the last thing we really want is to have kids who are already behind and certainly at greater risk of being left behind left out. We're also dealing with limited parental educational attainment, and in many of the communities we're in, less than 10% of parents have a college degree. If you're as a parent don't know how to multiply fractions, you aren't going to be able to really help and teach your child in that process. And it would be really convenient to pretend this is just a low income or low educational attainment issue, but it's not. You know, we have a game that teaches fractions, and I can't tell you how often I see kids ask their parents with help solving a problem, and it becomes clear that the parent doesn't really know. And I had someone go to me, oh, you know, it's the new math, and I don't know how to do that part. And I said, well, you're completely welcome to use how, you know, whatever method you want to solve how to divide 3/4 by half. And it was a less than thrilled reaction that I got. But when I talk about requiring many home help, it's because these are the kids who are going to need it the most. You know, my kids are going to come out of this relatively educationally unscathed, and I'm sure if your parents, your children will as well. But what we need to be doing is designing and being mindful of creating lessons for the kids who don't have that safety net. So limited language proficiency, this is one of those things that I think many of us know, but it's really hard to understand. And I say this is because for the last 5 years, we've been working on bilingual games, developing content and curriculum for English language learners. I speak 2 languages, and this was just really, really enforced to me the other day when I was helping my daughter. She's at immersion school, not nearly as bilingual as I would like her to be, no one to blame but myself. And we were working on our homework, and they were working on verbos irregulares, which is irregular verbs. So, you know, verbs that conjugate in a way that make absolutely no sense, basically. You know, if we're thinking about it in English, ate and eat, go and went. And now, if I didn't speak the language her homework was in, there's literally no way that I could have helped her. You know, it would have been just unreasonable to expect that she could complete that assignment. And so with millions of students in this country coming from homes where language is a barrier, is their reality, it's a real disservice to be giving them assignments that they just can't do. We think about this through a bilingual framework, and that's clearly a part of it. We have our games so the language of instruction is controlled on each screen. If you see up in the corner here where it says Español, you can flip back and forth on every page. But it's also academic languages, and something that a lot of parents are struggling with, either because they didn't master it themselves or because it's been 30 years since they used the word quotient. So we developed a growing line of kind of what's the word vocab type videos in terms of tackling that. And limited parental time. So when we were building out our content and curriculum, we thought about this as a kid whose parents aren't around, whether in some of the communities we're in, there's major issues with things like addiction, or they're being raised by, you know, a grandparent, or you know, or maybe it's because their parents had to work the overnight shift at the casino or work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But I think this is more relevant now than ever, because you might see all these bread making stories, and if you are sitting around making bread, more power to you. But right now parents are stretched really thin. They're essential workers in healthcare, or if they are working at the grocery store, or if they're recently unemployed and understandably consumed with that. And so whether they're fortunate enough to have a job where they can work from home but are trying to balance distance learning, in many cases distance learning multiplied. So the more we can remove the demand for parent time from student learning, the better results we're going to get. And so while we had developed our product looking at how can we optimize it so it's independent in the classroom, it actually translates relatively well when we move into the home as well. So this is just kind of a recap of that list to make it easier if you look through the PowerPoint. So we know what's going on, and we know that all educational outcomes aren't just about what happens in the classroom, but it takes on a new meaning as we take that traditional, what would have been a school model classroom setting, and find ways to translate that into the home environment. You know, if somebody had said to you, you know, 5 months ago, okay, but, you know, I'm going to give you 2 weeks, take an entire quarter's worth of curriculum online for your students to do at home. Here we are. You know, you would have thought that was laughable, but that's what teachers are doing. And it's hard. It is super hard. I always use this quote from a superintendent a few years ago when I asked if they wanted to do a virtual or in-person training. And he said, you know, it has to be in person, because no matter how easy people say it's going to be, he was talking about picking up new software, it never is. And as anyone who's ever used any software application knows, it's never as intuitive as the product developers claim that it's going to be. And I apologize on behalf of everyone that has ever created a software. So I listed some of the challenges to consider, but in the next part, we'll look at some ways to create lessons that can overcome that. And if you stick with me for like another 60 seconds, I'll stop talking and give you a chance to check some things out hands-on. I wish that I could just completely have a full solution for every individual on this virtual session's specific needs, but that's probably not going to happen. However, hopefully this either gives you a few examples you can use directly or relatively easily adapt, or at least can serve as inspiration for something that does fit your and your students' needs. So the first thing I would say is make it compelling. And I probably would have said engaging, but the rest of my list here starts with C, so compelling it is. And we can say that lessons should always be engaging, but with distance learning, kids are home and there's a bunch more options versus being in the classroom. And sometimes not doing any schoolwork is the most attractive one, right? And especially if the parent is doing work or distracted, right? In my own house, I can't tell you how many times my second grader's been supposed to be doing her work and gotten distracted, and we end up starting back over again. I'm a little biased, but I think games can be a great way to engage. And because you're probably getting to the point where you're starting to get easily distracted yourself, I want to give some time to get a chance to play some educational games. If you go to this link, and Maria, my co-founder, will put it into the chat, but here it is as well. You create kind of a mini quick links cheat sheet for this session, it will have a few other pages you might want to jump to as we go. But for the record, when you go to the game links here, I kind of hotwired it so you drop into the game without needing to register or log in. It doesn't typically cause an issue for making camp, and by that I mean you don't have to do the registration and go through kind of some of the intro and exposition to kind of get you into here's how you do it. But so it doesn't typically cause an issue for making camp if you go to that page, but if you go to Aztec Meet the Maya, it can get a little wonky after the second problem. So it's because trying to connect to a database, but you didn't register as a user. But that'll give you an example. If you check out Meet the Maya, you can play the game part, do a few problems, see the scaffolding with kind of clicking the explain button. You can see the bilingual experience. So that's one option. Making camp, if you want to do that, make sure that when you play, you should check out there's a little wigwam icon in the bottom after you've gone through and done some of the smaller modules, and you can go in and trade and get items to build out your wigwam there. Or if you're kind of the person that's like, I don't really want to go to a link, you can watch me play Fish Lake, and I'll offer my poor attempt at a Twitch streaming type commentary. But I'll give you about 5 to 7 minutes and we'll start back up.
The number of fish in the river may be going down. We may need to move somewhere else where there is enough food. I need you boys to go down river and see if there are fewer good game fish than last year. Last year we caught 125 fish in this river, and 25 of them were over 1 foot long.
Yes, I did. There's a comment in here about a lot of snakes. So when we first did the game, fun story, we kept telling our developers, like, this part is too hard. This game part, you couldn't get through the snakes, right? It was ridiculous. And so we make all of our developers so go to the middle schools that we work with as well, right? And so we had this little girl, she may be 5th grade, and we had our developer walk up, and she walks up to our developer when he was visiting. She said, "Did you make this game?" And he said, "What? Yeah, you feeling really good?" Yes, I did. "There are too many snakes. I tried to get through that, and I couldn't get through that. It took me 15 tries. Do you think this is fun? This is the opposite of fun." So we went through and we removed some of the snakes, and then in some other things we have kind of easier and harder levels, but that was a big part of it. So games are one way to get kids engaged, and we're clearly not the only people that make games. This whole day features amazing people who are creating amazing resources, and so there's a ton of them to be available for free during this time of school closures, not just from us but from a lot of companies. And there's a whole list on the site as well as on that Unconference page that has just links to resources that are being offered for free. And so these are some great, and I've seen just some really great examples in recent weeks of teachers finding ways to traditionally make what would probably be a worksheet a little bit more interactive. And so creative. So finding creative ways to do assignments is going to be another key in getting kids to complete them, right? This is a lesson plan we'd originally done as part of a supplemental teacher resource, and it can be adapted basically 2nd grade through any assignment that incorporates measurement. So area, perimeter, can be creative. And it's basically using an AR measurement app on the phones. If you have an iPhone, there's a version for it called Measure, and there's an Android version. We find almost all families have a smartphone, even in low resource communities. In those households, it's probably going to be a lower end device, and the thing that's really key for them is that using the apps doesn't require data. And so these measurement apps, the AR ones, are pretty fun. Another one I like is matchthememory.com. I use it a lot in doing middle school game design workshops, but you can create your own memory games, and you can do all sorts of different options as far as what you put on the card. So you can do matching an image to words. You can match one set of words to another set of words, so a phrase or definition. You could do a problem and an answer. So all sorts of different things. And we know drill and kill isn't maybe what you'd be doing in class for learning, but it is kind of a fun way to create an activity. And even better, you can just send the link, create it, send the link to kids. Students can do it. Don't need to log in, don't need to sign up. You can see how many people played it, but if you say want to know that they played it for sure, one of the things with memory match is you can do a little box so something pops up after they get a pair right. So, you can say, hey, write down the words or the numbers or whatever it was that I had in that box. So you're able to kind of show that they did it. And then otherwise you just give them that URL to do it. So I'll give you maybe 3 minutes, and we don't necessarily have to break out on that to check out those. If you haven't used the AR map before on your phone, you're probably already looking at it anyway. I think it's kind of fun one to do. And then I've got a handful of other relatively, and there's a couple match the memory links on that Unconference page. And I've got a handful of other relatively free, easy use type tools that I use for our middle school design workshop that I will share. I think each of us have a folder that we're putting materials in after this session, but if nothing else, I will also link a folder on that Unconference link for 7th generation games that I had. So yeah, so I see Anne Marie is kind of helping me out here and being our chat moderator, but yeah, so there's game reports for the games that kids do, and they will show things like problems that they were competed, what the problem was, how many attempts they took. Sometimes some of the games will show, did they click the hint, did they not, how many times did they do it, if they went through the activity, if they did the quizzes. It will bring up how they replied on the quizzes. So teacher reports are available. And if you are interested, that's through the link where it has to our page. It'll give all the information on that. So those can be completed, and they can be used for anything to, like I said, how the standards are, what how they're doing, or just are they actually using it? Because that's one of the things we've gotten from some of the schools is just, can you tell me if the kids are even logging in? Can we see that? So, and a big thing we say on everything we do is figure out how it works best for you. So we have some best practices and things like we've seen schools use it best this way, but whatever you want is the right way to do it for your class. you can use some of these online tools to create new content or assignments, but you can also turn the tables. And I'm pulling some of these next examples from things that we've done with projects that we do in tandem with our games, because I really like, and I try and draw from things that I like when I go to sessions, right? When you get really specific examples of here's a way that we did something, maybe you can do something like this, as opposed to here's this thing you can kind of use, you know, without kind of a concrete grounding to it. So one of the next couple examples draw from that. So our game Fish Lake, like I said, it teaches fractions. And one of the activities that we have worked with is to have students create a 5-question fraction quiz. So 3 equations, 2 word problems. And we find too many more than that, and they tend to lose interest. But they can create the quiz, and an answer key, and then they give the quiz to a classmate to take. And during social distancing, one thing that I found really brilliant that one of the teachers said is she's specifically assigning it to pairs of friends. Because there's this pressure to do it, so that one, your friend, you don't look bad like your friend did it and you didn't do it, right? Or you know, and then there's also this understanding, like if your answer key is wrong, that your friend's not going to be angry at you. Their friend's going to just say, hey, you know, you messed this up or something like that. But there's this way that she's kind of saying, you know, using positive peer pressure to make them do it. And having them write the quizzes can really give you some surprising insight into their understanding of when concepts are being used for better or for worse, and kind of being able to see how that's done. I always like watching the word problems that kids come up with. Now, one thing you can do is you can use this. And this is a couple examples of quizzes that we had. A 6th grade one, they did theirs on using like fractions, and another one on other fractions. So you can use this kind of Jeopardy lab, and I could have included that in the above one with creating your own, and it's kind of some of the list of resources, like I said, I will add in that maybe wouldn't make the full length of this presentation. But what I like most about this is, what I've seen that I like most is a teacher will sometimes take questions written by students and then put them into this Jeopardy format to be shared with everyone. And so you can do it as a teacher, or depending on grade level, kids can do their own, and it'll show a box with a bunch of, I think, like 5 categories and 5 each. You don't have to do all of them. And so you can kind of create this. The teachers the one example that I really like, and I kind of combined a couple on that breakout Unconference page, the Unconference link of things that I'd seen. So some, it was just, here's the problems. Another one is she pulled word problems that other kids had done and put them together in there. And what she did is she put the name of who created it on the answer page, because kids always want to either see their own name on it, or they want to see what kind of problems their other kids in their class came up with and who wrote that problem. The thing with this is you don't, and it's not, you know, it's one of the examples of let's figure out what we can use to make this distance learning work. So you can't actually input the answer in that, but one thing you can do is, if you look at, if you look at that last column that's there, is you can use a problem, and then you can put kind of some scaffolding or a hint in there, and so they could do the quiz or an assignment, they can fill out the problem there, and then if they need help, they can kind of click on that and it'll give them a hint, and so they can do it that way. And again, what I like about this one specifically is that it's a way that you can share it, create it, and they can access it without a login or a registration. And easy is really key. You know, both from a kid's, from a parent end, a student end, and an educator end, as I'm sure you all know. And so the one thing I say about Jeopardy is kids that we find these days don't typically understand that the answer in Jeopardy is supposed to be a question. So we've kind of dropped that.
You know, Maria, the reason I think these have been so successful with kids is because middle school kids are always wanting to know what the other kid's doing. So this is their way to kind of see, well, what's my friend doing and what did they write down? And as somebody used to teach middle school, I don't know how many times, I was like, you know what? Don't worry about what Jose is doing. You do what you're doing. So I think that's why this has been so popular with them.
Middle schoolers kind of leads us to our next point, which is critique. And so, especially if you teach middle school, there are no better and no more willing critics than middle schoolers. I always say I love testing our games in middle school, but you have to really have a thick skin, because they will tell you like it is. Adults will say, I really like this. It's really nice. Teachers will say, oh, it's really, I like the graphics. Kids are like, this part is dumb and I hate it and you should change this, and this part isn't fun. That part I really, really do like though, right? So when we originally designed this assignment here, we did as a part of a way to get student feedback, but also a way to engage kids who were below grade level in playing a math game that covered concepts they should have mastered, but hadn't yet. And it is a way to get participation levels from this, which is, my daughter was not really thrilled about wanting to participate in this photo shoot for us, but to get participation levels from this to this, right? And get kids excited about it. And we said, do this game, play this game. We Spirit Lake and or Fish Lake. It was kind of, we've done it for all of our games actually. That's right. So play this game and then offer ways that we could make it better. How can we improve this game? And we'd previously done this through discussion, which we got some feedback, we got some conversations, but it was very much like, you know, just dragging it out of them. And it wasn't as nearly as effective as we liked. So we made one change, this, and we got, I'm not kidding, an 80-fold increase in responses, right? So I literally have drawers of these cards in my office, and I do use them at night. But if you look at it, basically it was just adding in examples, sentence stems, ways that it could prompt them to give an example of what we were looking for. What would that mean? And that radically changed everything. And so asking for their input, how would you make this better? What ideas do you have? And kids really love games. I mean, you just look at the data. In middle school, it's 99% of boys, 96% of girls, I think. Kids are playing them a lot. So they have a lot of thoughts on games, right? And so asking them for their input. The teachers we work with have typically used it as the math games as a math assignment, and then this is a language arts pair of assignments, so kind of project-based learning. Often they'll take these cards and then they'll combine them. So, you know, their prompt, and then they take it and write something up from it. This is an example of they were also learning vocabulary. So what is genre? What is customization? And getting understanding of how to use those words and then how to describe that. And then ways that they could come up with, you know, sometimes we'll say, what are different problems that they can have? This one's talking about figuring out angles and power percentages. So building that kind of stuff up and really kind of getting kids excited and engaged about it. And we use this often too then as a jumping off for what kinds of things do you need to do games? Well, you need to be able to do math because that's a foundational part of programming. And here's some more typical examples. You know, instead of being in a forest, you should have hunters on ice. Teaching fractions, you should be using, or sorry, for cooking, you do fractions. Zombies, we went through like a couple of years where everything was supposed to be zombies. We did add a Wendigo, which is way cooler than a zombie. But, you know, so we've done that along those lines. And then we've had teachers adapt the cards to use for anything from video segments to books to basically anything. So there's a version of our game design cards on that Unconference page, and then a blank version that can be used for anything as well. And then choice or control. So giving kids a sense of control and choice was a conscious decision when we went into making camp. And there's like 55 sub activities. And we wanted kids to feel like they could choose which ones to do. And we found out that the kids ended up engaged way more when they could choose from different activities. And sometimes they want to choose the same activity over and over and over. So, and that's fine too. So you build that out and they're able to kind of do that. And that was a really good way to get them to feel like they were in control of that learning. And it kind of goes back to, you know, more options that kids have at home, right? So they could do a worksheet or do something else. And it's really easy to pick something else. But if the option becomes you have 3 different activities to do, choose from one to do today. It's partly about giving kids choice, and that'll make them more likely to do it. And it's partly about the parent aspect, right? So if there's 3 math activities and a kid has to do one, and these assignments maybe don't require a lot of parental oversight beyond did you do it, you're giving parents the ability to present the kid with which assignment did you do or choose? You know, not did you do your math, yes or no? And we all know either from basic psychology classes or just if you have children of your own, right? If you offer something as pick one of these, not this one, yes or no, this one, yes or no, you're going to get something more done. And the reality is we're working with some schools where they're saying, you know, we have, you know, 25% of our kids we don't hear from for a week or, you know, more, you know, maybe you'll only get 1 in 3 back, but 1 in 3 is much better than 0 in 1. So, and while I'm hoping no one has done this, there is a district. Go now. Okay. So like I said, I could not promise a cameo-free presentation. And so while no one has hopefully done this, there is a district we work with, and we've been going back and forth with the IT person trying to be a resource for them, because leadership said, don't put anything beyond 3 apps on the one-to-one iPads they're sending home. And we don't want, and they were talking about not putting on educational games or other educational, it's not like don't put on Tinder, right? And this is a district where iPad's likely the only access that these kids have to anything educational during the school closures. And it was because the justification they were saying is, well, they want the kids only to do the specific curriculum things, and that was it. But if they had a number of educational apps and some fun apps, one, it's more likely the kids are going to be on the device, which will make them more likely to, do their work, or at least see the messages that are incoming from their teachers. And if nothing else, at least kids are going to be engaging with something educational apps on these, even if it's not a curriculum app, which is going to be better than nothing. And the last one here is cut some slack. And I am assuming I don't just mean your students. I'm assuming that you're all compassionate people who realize that these are unprecedented times and everyone is trying to figure out how to make this work. And hopefully there's at least one takeaway from this session that might be applicable to you. But I also mean cut yourself some slack, because I know when I taught, and I thought I was a good teacher and my reviews said I was doing a good job, but I also stressed a fair amount about how it could be done better, or done better next time. And if you've taught something a few times, you start to feel more comfortable, right? But you're probably always still thinking about how can it be improved. And it's what I did as teacher, it's what I'm trying to do now. And here's the thing about distance learning, though, this is everybody's first time teaching like this, right? You're not going to be able to provide your students the same educational experience that they would get in your classroom. It's just not going to happen. And we talk all the time in education about expectations, and it's not a fair one to be putting on yourself. So it is 100% okay to feel like you didn't sign up for this. I've had multiple conversations for teachers who've said those exact words. I didn't sign up for this when I was going in to teach, but they're working really, really hard to make it happen anyway. And I think even though this wasn't part of the plan or something even considered in the realm of consideration until weeks ago, and so you were given days to take an in-person based curriculum and turn it into a distance learning solution that meets the needs of a classroom, or if you're teaching middle school, maybe different classrooms full of kids, with learning materials that probably weren't meant to be deployed this way. And so I say this, that you're doing an incredible job. And so like I said, I speak for people everywhere when I think all teachers should basically be told, thank you, thank you, thank you forever. And, thanks for this. And like I said, I hope, the work you're doing is important and truly appreciated, and we're here to try and support you and help you out whichever way we can. Well, thank you so much. If you have any questions, like I said, Maria at 7 Generation Games. I'm going to put everything on that Unconference page. If I haven't yet, put in some more of the, like I said, a folder with resources. I'll put my email on there, and feel free to reach out. And like I said, thanks so much for everything that you are doing, because I already knew, having worked in education and, working with teachers and creating what we're doing, but also as a parent that's now distance learning 3 children, it's a new appreciation even for someone who's super embedded in it. So thanks so much.
Maria, thanks so much for, even bringing in the idea and around equitability, because we do know that not everybody has equal access to, just even the internet. And the fact that your materials are online, offline, and that you're offering just so much choice and opportunity to collaborate within your structure is just wonderful. We started this day off talking about really how we are meeting some of the social emotional needs, and I think your product is doing that well. So thank you for that. I really appreciate that as a 5th grade teacher, where the most of my class are English or Spanish speaking students. So thank you.
Well, thank you.